Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. On today's episode, I very much want to delve in something that's been part of my path and something that I'm continually exploring still. So, where we left off last episode on the topic of surrender, I was having awareness of needing to do something different. And so, part of that was learning to choose me. And that is today's topic. So, I want to share about the art of choosing ourselves, what that looked, felt, and was like to experience for me. But then also, I'm going to give you some coordinates so that you can begin to explore how are you choosing you? Are there places you aren't choosing you that you can begin? And I kind of want to take it apart and look at it at different levels. So I'm very much going to enjoy diving into this topic with you today. And it's not one that I can recall hearing on anywhere. I don't recall reading anything about this. This has just been something that's been something I've had to learn through my lessons, and maybe it's part of your lessons too. Before I begin, it is the 11th today. By the time you are hearing this, I will already be at a creative apothecary in the Salt Cave, guiding a hypnotherapeutic meditation for the chakras, aligning, balancing, centering. And it's a very deep meditation. Everybody's going to be cozy in their 0G chairs, and I will take them through their energy systems. We'll do a little bit of entity release somewhere in there, gently tucked in, and clearing their energy systems. People always feel so much better after this. They've got a more vibrant look to their face, a light in their eyes, and so I enjoy doing this one very, very much. Coming up for you, next episode, you're going to get to meet Connie Jo Holmes, who is a beautiful hypnotherapist and coach colleague of mine that I've known now for a couple of years. And she's going to be coming and speaking on trusting your gut and how to live from a more spirit-led place. And I think that is going to be the perfect way to follow up this episode for you. Now, by the time you get to hear that episode, I won't be here. I will be in Vegas at HypnoThoughts Live on July 20th. If you happen to be going to the HypnoThoughts Live conference, I will have my 20-minute talk, and I'm talking about the connection between hypnosis, mediumship, but then also bridging connection to loved ones in spirit. And that is something very unique to my path again that I've been doing within the hypnotherapy field, being that I started out as a medium and then came to hypnosis. It's been interesting to see it evolve and how those paths have converged over time. Let me silence this phone. And so part of that, and it's an interesting thing when you become a therapist, a coach, any kind of holistic spiritual wellness practitioner, there is this wild thing that happens, and I really feel like it is kind of the law of vibration. You begin to attract a certain demographic of people, and sometimes that is based on your gifts. It's where you're at energetically. And so something throughout my hypnotherapist career that I'm noticing is that I attract people who also require my mediumistic skills. And what I found was I didn't want to be in a place where clients were coming and handing over their power. Instead, as a hypnotist, I became aware of, when I'm practicing mediumship, it's very, very familiar. And it's familiar in the sense of, this is hypnosis. I'm doing self-hypnosis in the moment, and that's how I'm connecting. And so what I wanted to begin to do was step out of the way as a reader, step out of the way as a medium, stop being the middleman between my clients and their loved ones. So rather than me telling you what messages or loved one is coming through, what I've learned to do is facilitate, either for an individual or for groups, I do both, to help people connect to their loved ones who are on the other side. And the power of this work is something that kind of organically came about and that I'm enthralled with. And so that is what I'm speaking on. I'm going to be speaking to other hypnotherapists and encouraging them and showing them some of the pitfalls on when things may get in the way. When can't someone connect to their loved one in spirit for themselves? Because if we all have the same hardware and we are simply learning to use the software, everybody's got the capability. And yet, it's nuanced. It's not always easy. Sometimes there are things in the way. As we've talked about before with spirit releasement, if we have an entity that is a lower vibration, that may hinder our connection. I've got another great thing lined up for you, and I'm so excited that I want to tell you soon. I'll tell you now. I'm a terrible secret holder unless it is something really crucial to someone. I'm not good at that. I actually have a plan to have Laura Whitworth on the podcast for you. Laura is the founder and creator of SCHH, Soul Centered Healing Hypnosis, and that is the version of spirit releasement that I have been getting my certification from and deepening into. Some of you have started to have those sessions already. I still have more to go. When I come back to Vegas, I'll be finishing that off, and there'll be a chance for you to work one-on-one with me to see if you have anything in your system slowing or hindering your connection. We're planning for Laura to come on in September. I'll keep you posted. I think it's going to be a great episode. And if you've ever had a chance to see her speak about this work, she comes from such a beautiful, loving, compassionate, integrous place. And it's going to be so much fun. But getting back to the rabbit hole that I just put myself down and took you with me for, is that sometimes those lower vibrational things can get in the way. And so we'll probably talk more about that in September. And so the reason Laura actually created SCHH to begin with was because she began as a quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner. And she noticed that some clients were unable to get to past life regression. They were unable to get to higher consciousness and to ask those really important questions. And so her clients started to organically kind of vibrate at that level of needing more serious intervention. People having parasites, people having entities in the way, larger attachments that were blocking and consuming their light. And so that's where SCHH was born. So within my work in helping people visit their loved ones in spirit, there is a small component of that. There are times when people can't connect to their loved ones. And I want to talk about all of those potential things that get in the way. Now, in Vegas, it's only a 20-minute talk. They have a new rule for first-time presenters that they get a 20-minute chance to come and speak. And so usually I would present this over at least an hour, possibly two. My goal with this is really to have more practitioners out in the world who are hypnotherapists and who perhaps are mediums as well, but aren't required. I want to see more people bridging this gap because I've seen so many beautiful things take place. I've seen wonderful healing moments. Whether the person was caught in grief, they didn't get to say goodbye. They've needed to work on the relationship, which was part of mine, part of my experience. When my biological father passed, we were estranged. And I'd heard from one of my favorite mediums when I went for a reading with Rita Berkowitz that I was kind of stuck. I was resistant and I needed to heal the relationship. And so I learned how to do that, even though he had passed from here, from now, so that I could better navigate my energy in my life. And that's been so just foundational for me. And so offering that for more people, but more importantly, I want to help other hypnotherapists do this work because sometimes as hypnotists, we see the whole gamut of things that get in our clients' ways. And a lot of times it's spiritual stuff that's lesser talked about, lesser known, lesser practiced. So I'm trying to bring some more awareness to this and to help you guys know that you can connect to your loved ones. You don't have to become a medium. You have everything you need. And with the right, well-trained practitioner or the right training, you can get there and have your own connections, foster those relationships, have those moments of catharsis, of forgiveness, of healing any patterns of relating and dynamics. So that's what's alive in me. That is what I am excited about. And so I will be doing that. Let's see. That will be Saturday, July 20th from 4:30 to 4:50. I am in Albert 1, and so you can join me for that. And because it is a brief talk and I want to be respectful of time, if you've got larger questions about how to navigate this more deeply, catch me after in the hallway and I'll dive in a little more. um, in any case, it's beautiful. It's really deep, rewarding work, and it enriches our lives on a whole other level. So that's what's happening there. The week after, we shall see where this goes. I might be crunched to do an episode for you that day, but I'm going to do my best to turn up and maybe even just do it live. And I want to speak again about what it was like in Vegas, how the talk went, some of the key moments that I want to share. And actually, you know what? That episode, why don't we just deepen into a little bit more connecting with loved ones in spirit? So I'll try to bring through some more insights to help you begin that process now for yourself so you can look forward to that. And I want to say that is going to be it's going to be quiet for me from my end a little bit. I'm going to be taking some time to reimagine things because I'm aware of coming up to a pattern again of needing to more concisely choose me. And hence today's topic. So last we were speaking about surrender, and I was sharing with you the moments where I was choosing and having awareness of needing to leave my first marriage. I'd had moments of surrender where I kind of fell on my knees in the bathroom, came to Jesus, just couldn't find a way through. And so practicing surrender was, I think, very much the first step for me. And the next immediate step that I was shown was that I had never chosen me. I had never had the understanding, the approval or acceptance, the allowance to choose me. And this isn't to place blame anywhere because I was raised by someone who was raised by someone who was raised by someone who all had these patterns kind of coming down through time and through space. Some of those patterns were societal, some of those patterns were emotional, mental, just things that were part of their reality as women, and not just as women, because men have to do this just as much. This topic really is for everyone. So I would have been around 27 at that time, 26, 27. And what I was really realizing at that moment was, okay, I was in this marriage, it wasn't working. I had the awareness of a partner wanting me to stay. And I had the awareness of I could stay. I could, with every ounce of me, stay and love him and try to be perfect and do everything that he wanted from me. And yet, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough. I knew that he would never be pleased. And I also knew that if I did that, there would be no chance of me ever coming to a place of self-love. Not really. Because in order for me to please him within the relationship, I had to disapprove of myself. I had to know that I was never going to amount to enough for him. And again, it's not to place blame. It's more that was how we'd energetically matched at that time. And it makes a lot of sense that we energetically matched that way, because when I look back to my childhood, there were all these thoughts and paradigms and relating dynamics of don't choose you. Choosing you is selfish. If you're choosing you, you're not a healthy, functioning family member. You're not taking care of the system. And so that was really a big part of the awareness in that moment of, oh my God, if I stay, I do everything I possibly can to love this person, and I can't love myself. What kind of a life is that going to be? And I realized that it wasn't an option. It wasn't a viable option. And so for that first time, what I began to do was to choose me. And I thought it very, at that moment, I really felt like there was no other option. And that was the first time that I was really being faced with that. Because even in other life choices and decisions, I tended to back down to what other people wanted or needed from me first. Whether that was a physical, mental, emotional, energetic need, didn't matter. Everyone else went before me. And that was how I was programmed. That was how I knew to respond. And so when you want things for yourself from that level of being, that level of existing, it's hard to even have awareness of things you want for yourself. It's hard to have the consciousness of, what do I need to be my best today or to even function today? Those things weren't requirements. And so I really lived from a place of thinking of, what does my mother need in order to be okay so that I can stay under the radar today? What does my spouse need from me as a person? And is that even going to work for me? That was never a question for me. So I literally jumped from my mother's kind of possession right into that marriage. And then I was finding myself coming out of it. And so I was aware of, if I'm going to choose me, I don't want to go home and be back in that lurch of, oh, I'm caregiving for my mother again. And again, it's not to place blame. She lived and did everything in the best way that she could with what she knew and what she'd had. But it was a very enmeshed kind of way to live. And so when somebody goes through enmeshment, enmeshment is that lack of a boundary between yourself and someone else. And for me, I had no concept of self. I had no concept of boundary. There was no place where I began or ended compared to what my mother may have needed. And so that meant that if something was wrong, there were times when I actually stayed home from school because she had a migraine and they wanted a caregiver. So, basic things like that. If she was going through something emotionally, she couldn't self regulate, I would do that. I would step in and do that. And so living from that place, I really didn't have awareness of my own needs. I wasn't conscious to my physical needs, my emotional, mental, spiritual, especially not energetic, any of those things. It's a very painful place to live from, because when you're living from that place, you're not giving from a place of love. You're not giving from a place of joy of, oh, what a pleasure this is to do this for someone. Not because they're going to owe me or anything else, but just because I want to and I can, and what a gift for them to receive. And that's the really beautiful place that I want to be in, that I prefer to stay in when I give and when I do something. Because when we give from a place of feeling like it is required of us, or we're feeling possible resentment, or it feels like obligation, you can feel that. You can feel those gifts that aren't given from that place of pure joy. It feels like a demand. So If you are cognizant of nonviolent communication, you're going to recognize some of the things that I'm saying today. I recently came through the nonviolent communication course that just passed through Sounds True. A big fan of Marshall Rosenberg and learning to use those skills for communication. So you may be familiar with that. And if you're not, I recommend it to everybody, not just people who want to heal any delicate dynamics of coming through codependent type patterns or having been through trauma, but anyone who's trying to have a healthy relationship and communicate within it. NVC is all about speaking the language of need. And Marshall has a gift to talk about when we are loving someone and we're giving from a place of wanting to give, what a delight that is. And also what a delight that is to receive. And so maybe you've had times as well. You've received things from people who felt like they were doing it out of obligation or out of expectation, and it just didn't feel the same, did it? To receive from someone who's like, oh, let me do this wonderful thing for you that's going to meet a need for you. It's entirely different. So what I recognize in myself is that a lot of my early childhood programming led me to be very codependent in nature. Now, I've not particularly had a diagnosis for this, but I definitely recognize a lot of traits and having lived out of those patterns. And another thing that I began to recognize is those of us who identify as being empathic, often, maybe not all, but those of us who've become very spiritual in nature, we are able to sense and read other people's energy. We're able to have psychic impressions coming off other people. I want to open to the perspective that some of that is developed from a place of not feeling safe in childhood. At least that was certainly my experience of, okay, here is this figure in the family whose value as and importance is much higher than mine, and it is my job to meet their needs. What that lent to was me being able to sense, to know what do they need before they know they need it so that I can meet it. It's a very reactive, always in action mode of how can I soothe or pacify this other person. It's a very anxious place to live. It's a very exhausting place to live. It's a very undernourishing place to live. And so learning to choose you is really an art form. If you're coming from those same kind of territories that I came out of, if you're coming from relationship dynamics that were the same, it's not the easiest because it's not a natural response. And if anything, it goes against the conditioning or the training that you may have had in childhood for life. The strategy in childhood for me was to always take care of others so that I would be safe. Instead of how can I fully resource myself to take care of myself so that I am safe. Do you see how different those ways of thinking are and how challenging? It's just, I don't know, it's just wild to explore. So I'd lived that way until 26, 27, when then it was like a rude awakening of, I have no choice. I need to choose me. And realizing I had never chosen me before. And so choosing ourselves can come on several different levels. We may choose ourselves at the physical level. Choosing ourselves at the physical level means we're meeting our own physical needs first. You're ensuring that you've met all of Maslow's needs, whether that's security, safety, food, roof over your head, literal coverage from the elements, and being okay. So we can do it at the physical, but then also that expands out several other ways. You'll have to mind me. I'm itchy, I'm scratching, I'm in the middle of the throes of a giant allergic response. It's the weirdest thing. And so while I am looking at choosing me, part of that might be, oh, you know what? I'm really feeling uncomfortable in my skin, quite literally right now. I'm going to need to choose me and how I spend my time. I'm not going to be putting myself outside in the sun where it might aggravate that, right? So that would be a way that I could choose me in the throes of what I'm going through right now. What about you? How many times are you choosing things for other people instead of choosing you? Do you go to bed when you feel like you need to go to bed? Or do you wait and meet your partner part way? It's a little thing, but when we live our lives in a series of habits, they add up very quickly. And we can look at how much of my day did I choose me? How many parts of my day did I resource myself? How many times a day did I communicate what my needs are, or was I even conscious of what my needs were? So for me, choosing me is an art form. It is a dance, and it is possibly going to be wildly uncomfortable at first. But it's also wildly exhilarating. And the rush of feeling that can arrive when you live from this place. So I was aware of needing to leave the marriage. I went home for a little while because I knew that my current partner had some life stuff to work out. I wanted to put some money in the bank, work a little bit, get a passport, and get ready to come to the US to meet him, to see if that was what I wanted in the process of choosing me. And I think many people were surprised when I left that marriage. I had already been married for about 7 years at that time. And it just came to a non-negotiable place for me if there is no other way out and through. And so because I'd already surrendered to a higher power, if I don't know how to move, I'm willing to sit back and let you show me, guide me. That was the guidance. The guidance was, hey, you're backed into a corner. There's nowhere else to go. Are you going to choose you now? Or are you going to choose a life of misery that can only go so far, and you're going to keep bumping into this again and again? And essentially that's what had happened. Was I became aware of it and said, no, I'm going to do it a little different this time. And I began to have awareness of me. And let me tell you, when you have surrounded yourself with people who are expecting you to move, to be, and to show up in a certain way, and then you begin to no longer fulfill that role, that doesn't look like as growth or a positive thing in their eyes. In their eyes, they may perceive that as you being selfish all of a sudden, when you used to regularly meet their needs without them even having to ask, and now you're not available. And moreover, you're not available, you're doing things that are aligned for you, which may not be aligned for them at all. So that was an interesting time, because within leaving that, I didn't heal that pattern right away. There are still times, actually just last weekend, I came up to another opportunity choice point of, am I choosing me? How am I choosing me? Where am I not choosing me? And having to kind of give that perspective and looked at again. And I can say that I am more thrilled and happy with where I am now, but it's a continual process and work of art for me. And it is really art because it can be beautiful. So after I did finally make some money, get the passport, and go to Oregon to meet my now spouse, who I've been with for 15 years, it felt otherworldly. Like I felt like I needed to pinch myself, because it's like, oh, I finally am listening to what my needs are, to who and what I want, and I'm not having to give all of my time or energy over in that same way. Now, let me be super clear. I wasn't perfect about it. And in fact, there were ways that within the marriage over the past 15 years that I haven't always chosen me. There have been times when I have regressed back into that old conditioning, that old patterning. And I get very uncomfortable very fast now, which is a wonderful sign. For me, that's a good signal of, no, you've done that. You don't want to live from that place anymore. But in those first days, we literally would drive off into the sunset together, and we felt like we broke the matrix, like we escaped. We both got out of these patterns of living for other people. And it wasn't just me, my spouse actually had that pattern as well. And so for us to shatter those paradigms and create something entirely new rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And no judgment on that. You know, they're living from their own patterns as well, things they learned in childhood and conditioning too. And so when we got to start over, there's such a rush, there is such a joy in living and fully being aware of, oh, I'm a human being. I have needs. How would I like to meet those needs today? In what way would feel and bring me the most life, the most satisfaction, where then I'm so filled and fulfilled and loved that I'm living from that more loving place every single day. And so choosing ourselves comes in lots of different levels. We talked a bit about the physical. I also want to talk about the mental. Choosing me was a whole new thing. I'd never done that before. And so there is a mental shift that has to take place. There is like an inventory of, what do I need? What do I want? Am I trusting myself to have the ability to show up and do this thing that I'm passionate and excited about? Can I give myself that grace? Have you ever asked yourself that? It's a really powerful way to begin to work and engage with ourselves. And so I'm hoping that as I'm talking about this, you're going to start getting these coordinates and looking things over your life. When you've done things, who was it for primarily? And did you do it just because it worked for you at the time? Or was it actually driving you towards the outcomes that you wanted? You know, was it part of the step of getting to where you wanted to go? Or did you kind of live haphazardly like I was and just ended up where I was? And I think when we're not living in the art of choosing us, what can happen is we feel as though we are just at the whim of the universe. And that puts us in kind of like a victim mindset of, oh, this thing happened to me, or I had to do this. There's a whole language that goes along with living and choosing other people before ourselves. And so your languaging, your thought process will change. And it will be more of, oh, I get to, I'm going to, I'm excited to, I'm choosing. And it's not from a place of demand or feeling obliged. It's a very active way to live. It's a very engaged. And I'm no longer at the whim of the universe. Now I'm taking assertiveness, I'm making choices, I'm choosing. And so that feels far more empowering. To live in that space of not choosing self is a very disempowering place to live. It's like living under a rock. You don't get to feel the sunlight on your face. And so if you're willing to quantum jump into a new reality, into a new frame of mind, oh, you can up-level your life so much. And so part of this I've been sharing along the way too. As a wild synchronicity, I reconnected last week with my aunt, my godmother, and it was funny timing because not only did I just speak to the whole surrender thing on the podcast, but then also knew that I wanted to do this episode about the art of choosing you and to give you some coordinates to choose you. And then I remembered also there was a conversation at some point with my godmother's daughter, my cousin. And not long after I'd left that marriage, she was actually going through something similar where she was trying to decide and asking me, how did you know that leaving was the right thing to do? And I had to get really raw with myself about how did I know? Partly because I know they are very Catholic, and that's, they uphold those values. And so those vows of marriage are really important. And it was to me as well. But I was also having that awareness of if I'd chosen him, there was no room to choose me. And if I didn't choose me, I didn't know if I'd make it. I didn't know if I could live. I didn't know if my health would hold up. When we don't choose ourselves every day at the level of physicality, we're putting ourselves in danger. We're not aware of our security, our safety, or not aware of our nutritional needs. We're not aware of sleeping or exercising to strengthen our bodies. And that's so important. We're not aware of putting our health conditions first. And so many people with that frame of thinking actually go on to have autoimmunes. They go on to have diseases where they've not cared for their body well enough because they're not home. They're busy living for other people or living out of other people's needs. And so I had that awareness of if I did not change that, I might not have made it. And not to go to a dark place, but realistically, if you're not living out of you, you can't live anyone else's life for them. And conversely, no one else can live for you. Even those people who have the similar patterns that I had, who may be choosing you before you're choosing you, you know what it's like to receive that. That doesn't always feel so good. Then you feel indebted to them. You feel like you owe them. That doesn't feel great. That comes with possible demands on your reciprocity. Right? It's not a comfortable give take exchange of love, in my opinion. It doesn't feel like an exchange of love at all. For me, loving is an act, it's a choosing, it's a doing, a wanting. It's not something that you feel like you have to do in order to survive or to be safe. In any case, I had told my cousin that I chose me. And because if I didn't choose me, there was nowhere else to go. That I could have stayed, I could have loved him, I could have tried, it never would have been good enough. Neither one of us would have really been happy. I don't think he was choosing life with me because he actually loved me for who I was. I think he loved me for the things that I did for him. I think he loved me for the ways that I chose him over myself. I think that fed maybe a self-importance for that person. It's not really love. That's not an easy thing to admit. So in that moment, I got very raw and I told her I was choosing me. And since then, I'd had that consciousness, that awareness of how am I choosing me? When am I not choosing me? And there are times when I fall back in where I might attract a person of that vibration. And I may go into a little bit of a trauma response where I do self-abandon. And so that's something I'm actively still very much working on. Not currently do I have that happening, but I have in the past 2 years have at least one time where someone came along and I automatically stopped choosing me because their energy, their patterns reminded me of my mother. Those really deep psychological roots. So at some point, that is probably something I will work deeper on within hypnotherapy because that is the place to do that. That is the best approach for it because counseling and therapy have not even begun to reach that at all. At least not for me. So, as empaths, if you identify as an empath, as a psychic, as a medium, I am inviting you to enter into choosing you more readily, more actively. And choosing you right at the beginning of the day might look like before your feet even hit the floor, allow your eyes to be closed for a moment, actually feel what it feels like to be in your body. What does this body need today? Has this body had enough rest? Is this body going to need some water today? Does this body need a good bath or a shower? Does this body need a little bit of physical exertion to get it into better condition? Is it feeling balanced? What interventions might there be? And then after we look at the physical, I like to move into the emotional. And the emotional can sometimes speak to the mental as well. How am I feeling today? What is the overall emotion that's present within me? So something that I actively do, and when I teach this to clients, it's often a big part of the self-empowerment journey that we do and about learning to be more assertive, is actually identifying, and I love to work with the Marshall Rosenberg Wheel of Emotions. What are you feeling in the moment? Because feelings are messengers. They don't arrive out of nowhere. They don't come in to take over your life, but rather they come to pass on the message. The more we dodge and run away from that message, the longer they will chase you. It's almost like that scene from Harry Potter where all of the owls are coming in to deliver that message to Harry that he's gotten into Hogwarts. And the longer that they resist, the more that it persists. It's the same. A good messenger is going to give you the message. And so when we can actually meet the messengers of, okay, what am I feeling? What do I need? We get to understand better. So for me, choosing myself means having that emotional intelligence to plug into what I'm feeling. If there is a sense of emotional discomfort, what is that speaking to? Is there a boundary that I require of myself or of someone else? And if that someone else isn't willing to meet that boundary, how am I going to? Because when we live from the art of choosing ourselves, we're living from that more empowered, assertive place of I am going to meet my needs because it's important, because I am important, because I have value. And when I resource myself through the art of choosing me over and over again, I can afford to show others how to choose themselves. I can afford to love others wholly and fully. And that is the most beautiful thing. That brings the most joy, the most nourishing and enriching relationships. And that is why I'd love to see you begin to actively, proactively, assertively choose you. Live in the art of choosing you. Several times a day, multiple times a day, on the physical, on the emotional, on the mental. When we're choosing ourselves energetically, are you setting your need and aware of your need for energetic space, especially as an empath? What happens when empaths go out into a crowded place where there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of sensory? They get burned out, they feel overwhelmed, they get high anxiety, and then they want to self-isolate. What if they had just chosen to live in the art of choosing themselves? And they say, yes, I can go to the social engagement. Here's how long I have the capacity to do this for before there are negative consequences to the choice. And if it is worth it, then they can do it. And if it's not, maybe it's giving ourselves permission to say, you know what? I can't see how this works at any advantage in my life right now. I'm going to start making different choices. I'm going to head in a different direction and see what wants to happen there. What a more engaged, alive place to live. And so the other part about choosing you is it's not going to feel natural. You're going to buck against conditioning. You're going to buck against it societally, especially if you're a woman. We've been under the expectation for a long time of be a wonderful mom, be available for your children, also work full time, bring in a full income, and keep the house clean. And don't need help. Like you're somehow failing if you need help on any of those things. And each one of those is a full-time job, especially if we're doing it from a place of love. So there are a lot of times when you begin to choose you that you may be met with certain reactions, responses. You may trigger people's shadow because they will see you choosing you. And maybe that's something they want for themselves and they don't know how to do. And they have a certain level of discomfort with it. And so that will get projected onto you. And so that's when we hear those things like, oh, that's selfish. Last I checked, there's no one coming to live my life for me. There's no one else who is able to actually look and understand my needs and meet them for me. That pleasure is all mine. That pleasure is all yours. There are no heroes. And even when someone comes in a heroic fashion, like a codependent can often do, there are ties to it. It comes at an energy cost. There are natural consequences. And so the art of choosing you is going to be breaking that conditioning. It's going to be becoming more conscious. And with each thing that you're engaging in, asking, who am I choosing if I do this thing? If I spend my time in this way? If I'm focused on this, who am I thinking about first? Who is this benefiting? Is this going in the direction where I am choosing me, where I am resourcing me? And not from a place of being selfish. It's a place of the more that I fill this cup, the more I have available. And so often I hear about how I have so much warmth. I give people the feeling of so much safety and security where they can be authentic, they can be vulnerable, they can be supported. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because I choose me, because I've been choosing me, and I will continue to choose me. And that's why when I work with clients, a lot of them will evolve to the point where they can begin to choose themselves, especially those who come in and they're aware of being in a narcissistic marriage, or they've got those relating dynamics with family members. And so choosing you really can be that art form. It can be a dance, it can be a pleasure and a joy, and the benefits for everyone around you are ginormous, because then you're also speaking and teaching and modeling how they can choose them. I don't know about you, but I want to live in a world where everyone is choosing themselves. Then we meet in the places that intersect or in between that enhance life. That's a world that excites me. Can you imagine? I think it would be so beautiful. And I'm welling up because just the thought of living in a world where everybody's interacting and engaging from a whole different place, I feel like it would be so much more loving and so much more collaborative, in a way that's just life affirming and giving. So that's something that excites me. Spiritually, choosing ourselves, it can be the bigger things. If someone knows they are not aligned to be a parent, and they choose to be a parent out of someone else's needs, how's that going to go? I'm imagining not well. I chose to be a parent, and I had wanted to be a parent. And I feel like because I did, I lived from a very passionate place when it was my time to do that. But I've also observed a lot of people who didn't want to be a parent, and they weren't choosing themselves, and then they became a parent. And they became the kind of parent that didn't know how to nourish, how to model, or resource a child in a way that could teach that child to do that for themselves. And we talk about ancestral healing. When I look back at my mother, and when I look back at my grandmother, who I very much love, I see that played out over and over again. My grandmother's mother had passed away, I think, when she was maybe between ages 9 or 11. She was quite young to then go on and to not have a mother. And I think there were many times in her life, because of societal roles and expectations, that she made choices that weren't necessarily her choosing her. She chose to get married. She chose to have 11 children, I believe. Some of them I feel like may have been out of necessity, expectation. They had Catholic faith, which was important to them, which means they didn't use birth control. And I think they missed the memo about abstaining, maybe. But every day, because of those choices, I saw my grandmother not live from a place of choosing anything for herself. She didn't get to choose how she spent her time, because then she had several people depending on her to show up and to meet their needs. And I think because of that, her relationship with my mother was a hard one. And I think my mother often felt alienated and rejected by her mother. And so when it came time for my mother to be a mother to me, she didn't have that ability. She didn't know how that worked. She didn't have those coordinates, those blueprints to pass over and to pass on. And so I learned to parent from a place of, here's the checklist of things I didn't receive. I chose to parent in a way that was codependent, because I wanted to feed into my child rather than have my child try to be feeding into me all the time. So I did the opposite of what I'd had, and that was not necessarily better. Unfortunately, we both learned the hard way that then that pushed him into a different way of thinking and being out in the world that was not the most well-adjusted one. And so, that was a big learning lesson too. It's interesting how it all kind of repeats and unfolds. And oddly enough, it was as I became aware of being codependent as a parent, of constantly trying to meet his needs above my own, and I would meet like caregiver burnout, secondary trauma, just feeling entrenched in it because of his relationship with his mother. This is a whole other complicated dynamic there, right there. Oh, goodness. I was, again, hitting that wall of, I'm not choosing me again. And you'll know when you're not choosing you, because you're going to feel that disempowerment within your system. You're going to feel that lackluster of life. You're going to feel the lack of energetic reserves. You're not going to be giving and doing things from a place of love. You're going to be doing it from a place of frustration, of anger, of exhaustion, feeling like you have to, because if you don't, no one else will. And just because we can do it doesn't always mean that we should, because maybe someone with the right energy could come along and do it better. And it would be from a place of love for them, rather than from a place of not self-prioritizing from us. I don't want to leave you in too much of a kind of lurch with all of this, if this is new information for you, because it was definitely something that I've taken my time with. I've had time to re-examine and re-experience over and on different levels within different types of relationship roles and expectations. But I do want to leave you with the excitement and the curiosity of how are you choosing you? Can you commit to choosing you a couple of times a day? Can you commit to checking in, one, on your physical needs, two, on your emotions, and what might you be needing from the relationships that you're in? And then also energetically, spiritually, are you aligned with your path? Are you aligned with what is organic and authentic for you? What would it look like for you to begin to check in a few times a day to say, where am I at right now? Am I doing this from a place of wanting safety and security? Am I doing this from a place of I'm fully present and alive and from a place where I have to give? For me, that was where the biggest, best change happened. And you can feel when you are choosing you because things don't feel fearful. Instead, I feel like it's replaced with an excitement. It's replaced with an aliveness of, ooh, if I take this next insight, if I trust my gut, where is this going to take me? And I feel like we've kind of come all the way back around, haven't we? So, from a trauma-informed place, choosing you, if you are aware of feeling guilt, of feeling shame, of feeling selfish, of feeling like a burden, connect with me. I want to be there for you. I want to help give you some coordinates to guide your way through. I've been there. I know the territory well, and we can resolve some of those unconscious programs that are locking you up so that you can begin to choose you. And the people that you love, when you're loving them in that way, they're going to feel it too, and it's going to benefit them as well. It's not just about you. And so the art of choosing you is living in a way that models that really helps other people to choose themselves too. And if the whole world came from that place, oh, God, that would be beautiful. We could give other people the opportunities to rise when they're ready to rise, to rest when they need to rest, and we meet each other where we are and work in a much more cohesive and collaborative way. If that's a journey you're on, I'd love to take it with you. You're able to reach out, ask me any questions that you've got. How are you choosing you today? Let me know. And next episode, you're going to hear the beautiful Connie Jo Holmes talk about trusting your gut. And I really feel like after that place of surrender, when you're coming into the art of choosing you, that trusting your gut is the next step on that path. It's the next natural evolution. All right, soulful seekers. I am sending you so much love, so much joy, so much connectedness. Do things that bring you joy, that bring you to life. Because, oh man, baby, you're beautiful when you live from that place. All right. Bye for now. And I look forward to telling you all about Vegas when I come back. Bright, blessed. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.